Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to Star Trek Discoverage, the live podcast that boldly goes into excruciating detail about the Star Trek Discovery episode that just aired on CBS All Access. I'm your host, Caliban, and I want to remind you that context is for kings. Texting is beyond my parents, though. It's so hard for them to just send a text. You know, they always have to phone, but they're from a different time. I understand. They just want to hear my voice. I'm joined on this show by a pair of very special guests. First up, she's the co-host of the Generations Geek podcast, and she was on our last show. The Generations Geek is available on Chronic Rift Network. I'm just calling it right now. I think that she's probably the co-host of this podcast at this point. Ella Pearson is on the show.
Happy to be back.
Welcome back, Ella. It's been a few weeks now since there's been a new Generations Geek episode. What's coming down the pipe for GG?
It's been more than a few weeks. We are still working on our multi-part Alien podcasts.
Oh, nice.
So coming up will be the next part of that.
Is that so? You've had one of those already, and are you covering the entire sphere, like the comic books, like every single thing that's got Alien on it in the world, or the movies, or what?
So far, we are just planning on the movies. So we've done the 2 prequels, and next up will be Alien and Aliens.
Oh, okay. All right. And you're looping Covenant, right, and Prometheus and all that good stuff into it. And I say good stuff, but that's just an expression.
I was going to say good stuff.
Maybe not
you
so
can
great.
listen to the podcast about it.
And also joining us on the show tonight, he's the author of Hammerjack and Prodigal, and he penned the novella Revenant for the Trek 7 Deadly Sins anthology. He's Marc Giller. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Considering I'm the guest and you guys are the 2 co-hosts, you have to promise not to gang up. You have to promise not to gang up on me, though. That's all I ask.
All right. Yes. Provisionally, yes. Marc, you were on Enterprising Individuals early in the year, and we talked about the episode Conspiracy. And one of the things that you kind of praised about it was taking Trek in different directions, the sort of like horror aspects. And you said that you might want to see that in maybe an upcoming show. And after watching this episode, I think you're kind of getting your wish.
Big time. I was very kind of bowled over by it because, to be honest, I was not extremely impressed with the 2-part pilot. In fact, I had a heck of a lot of complaints about it. I did a blog post on a website that I write for, which is, kind of detailing all my nitpicky things that I had wrong with it. But, overall, I just thought that the tone was, just very mixed. The entire thing was a mess. Didn't particularly care for the way they developed the characters, and it's just like a show called Star Trek Discovery, and where's the Starship Discovery? I don't even get to see that until
right.
A later episode comes along. So I, going into this, particularly whenever I see the 2 words Akiva Goldsman associated with anything, I'm always very, very dubious at best.
Yeah.
But definitely going into this episode, I didn't exactly know what to expect, and and certainly it was a really big wholesale change. Not only in the direction of the story, but also the tone and everything else. And you want to talk about dark stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I was very impressed and just admittedly very, very, very surprised with the direction they seem to be taking this.
They're amping up the dark, grimdark aspects because there's a lot of tude on the Star Trek, or on the Discovery. A lot of people have big attitudes, and it seems like they took that rule about nobody has any conflicts in the future, and instead of just putting it in a side drawer, they threw it into a volcano. I mean, like, everybody seems angry and upset, and they all seem to hate each other on board the Discovery.
Oh, yeah, they definitely make Deep Space Nine look like the Love Boat.
Right, yeah. That's a great point. Well, I wanted to say, just looking back, you mentioned the pilot. The news is pretty good about the pilot. I think CBS said, with no specific numbers, but they said that they specifically had really increased their subscriber growth on CBS All Access, due, I'm sure, to the show. And the ratings are pretty high for the debut episode as well, with around 10 million viewers last Sunday. So that's not too bad. Those, of course, are the broadcast Nielsen ratings for the Vulcan Hello that aired on CBS. So things are looking pretty good as far as people watching the show so far.
Yeah, then that's it's heartening to see because again, like I said, I mean, even though I definitely had my reservations with the two pilot episodes, I've always Star Trek has had a real kind of a mixed history when it comes to pilot episodes. I mean, even harkening back to the original series, when Gene Roddenberry did The Cage and NBC initially rejected that, and then they went back and retooled it for Where No Man Has Gone Before.
Yeah.
Even going back that far, obviously they had problems and things that they needed to work out, and of course everybody knows about the Star Trek: The Next Generation encounter at Farpoint. I mean, the production problems on that were legendary, and the end product, with the giant space jellyfish flying off in the end as well too. It was definitely problematic, and that series, it probably took an entire 2 seasons before they finally got their feet beneath them. So to kind of see this, taking such a radical change in direction, and definitely one which I think is very interesting in that it is very different for Star Trek. Again, I mean, as you mentioned, Conspiracy, the episode that we talked about last year, and this is, kind of very, very much in that vein, a very overall creepy, suspenseful kind of feel to it, and just the way they seem to be building up Captain Lorca as well too. You don't know everything about the guy, and I kind of had my suspicions that maybe he wasn't being completely forthright with Burnham. When they're having their conversation about the space spores that can take you to the end of the universe, and that all seems very, very happy and go lucky, but not in their tone of the rest of the episode. And the way they ended it up definitely, proved me right about that point.
Yeah, Captain Lorca named as such because Ahab was already taken, I think.
I guess so.
You mentioned, so I want to know what you guys think now that the pilot is out of the way, and you'd mentioned, Mark, that it did feel like a sort of superfluous kind of extra prelude type story. In fact, Aaron Harberts, the co-runner of the show, did specifically talk about how they consider the third episode to be the pilot. And my thing is like, all right, well then why have the first 2 episodes, which were fine, but there's a lot of story elements in her backstory that could have been told in flashback or just some other kind of way throughout the season. As an author, Mark, what do you think about the way that they've structured and told the story so far?
Well, as I said, with the pilots, with the 2 pilot episodes, I was definitely did not care for that all that much. And, certainly as a writer, I hate flashbacks as a story device. Absolutely can't stand them.
Oh boy!
And it just and certainly in those first 2 episodes, I mean, Burnham was having flashbacks left and right.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Were always, I guess that's okay if you structure it in the right way. But they had all of these big tense action scenes building up with the Klingons and the ships, and they're worried about everything blowing everything up, and it's all hell's about to break loose, and then they stop in the middle of it to have a flashback, and it could really just interrupted the flow of the whole thing as well too. So that may have been part of the problem that I had with it. But I just generally don't like that all that much. But but I guess the main thing is that with those first 2 episodes is like it was all essentially the way they set it up is completely backstory. This captain is going to die, because obviously she's not going to be the main character on the show, the main captain of the show, and the Discovery hasn't even made an appearance yet. So that the Shenzhou whole thing was that was just strictly temporary as well too. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. And, and all of that, I would have probably started off with this as the pilot, as it definitely seems to set a better tone, and hopefully the rest of the series will follow through with that same tone that they've established in this one as well too. And maybe just kind of related those things in just little elements here and there, backstory, telling you a little bit more and more a bit about Burnham as time goes by, and kind of reveal her character and maybe make her a little bit more mysterious. But as it is right now, we just kind of have everything all at once.
Yeah, she could just be introduced. She's the mutineer. Ooh, what's her story? Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And that would have been interesting to find out as time goes by. But
it's a very TV way to tell stories, with flashbacks. And there's a thing that I feel like Battlestar Galactica probably started popularizing it. But the whole, I don't know how we're going to get out of this 72 hours earlier. And so they start, immediately, immediate res, as it were, with the teaser. And then they go back and sort of fill it in. I expected they'd do something like that. But, they're doing this instead. Ella, question for you. To me, I don't feel... Does this feel like Trek to you?
Yeah.
It does? I was watching this just at the end of this last episode that we just watched, Context is for Kings. I was watching it, and there was the conversation between Cadet Tilly, my new favorite character. There's going to be a new one every week, I think. She was talking to Burnham, and I was like, this doesn't... I don't mean like, it doesn't feel like Trek, like in a trolley kind of way. I just mean like it doesn't feel like an episode of Star Trek, and that's fine. It kind of feels like a sci-fi series or like a Battlestar Galactica spinoff or something like that. I feel like Trek is around the edges, but with the serialized storytelling and the very dark tone, I just kind of realized this doesn't really feel like Trek. What do you think?
This episode definitely, I think, feels different than what we've seen on Star Trek before. Especially like the rift between the first 2 episodes and then this one. It seems like a completely different story.
Yeah.
Which is fine, and I'm completely down for it. I thought that was an amazing episode. But it still feels like Star Trek to me, just kind of like it's not your grandma's Trek.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, we did just finish watching the 3rd episode of Star Trek Discovery, Context is for Kings. The official synopsis from CBS was, Michael Burnham finds herself aboard the USS Discovery, where she quickly realizes things are not as they seem, including the mysterious Captain Gabriel Lorca, the heir to the fortune cookie throne, I guess.
That was a nice touch.
Yeah.
It was.
That was a fun little bit. And of course, they bring it back at the end when he, hands her a cookie, like what's her fortune, what's her future going to be.
That was good.
Yeah, nice bit of way to bring the story back to the beginning.
Yeah, I guess that means that we have to add to seek out new life and boldly go where no one's gone before in bed. You have to add that to the end of that now. Well,
oh, for sure. But I tell you, it's you mentioned that you mentioned how this kind of doesn't totally feel like Star Trek, and in one respect, I think that's absolutely true. In that one of the complaints I had about the Next Generation was how everybody really seemed to speak in this stilted Star Trek technobabble, formal type stuff, which just really didn't sound like people who were familiar with each other and had known each other for years and were really, really, really close would talk to one another. Right. And I had that same problem with the first 2 episodes as well, the 2-part pilot, in that it was just, oh my gosh. I mean, I just, the joke that I made was it seemed like they used the same wooden dialogue generator that they used on 24. Okay, and yeah, but with this one though, it was definitely, definitely a difference in the dialogue and the way that the characters related to one another too, because I did enjoy the interaction and the way that they talk to one another, aside from, they're all already hating each other's guts and snapping at each other and whatnot, the conversation, the dialogue, the way that people talk to each other actually felt a lot more real to me.
Yeah, and plus, there's always if you don't feel like, if I want to continue with this whole it's not Trek thing, you can always just say that it's, Discovery is being set up as a very different ship. It exists outside of the normal fleet of Starfleet, and they're off kind of doing their own thing, and everybody's sort of looking side-eye at each other, and maybe there's plenty of happy ships back in Starfleet who are all talking in very stilted dialogue and getting in weird, sexual adventures on pleasure planets or something like that. But yeah, it is a little different. Speaking of the Discovery, we get our first real look at the Discovery in this episode. What'd you think about that?
It's I'm kind of wondering about the scale of this ship. I mean, it practically looks as big as the Galaxy class or like the USS Vengeance from Star Trek Into Darkness. I mean, it seems like a really, really, really big ship, certainly even bigger than the Constitution class Enterprise that we see in the original series.
I'm fairly sure that it is bigger than the Constitution class. There's a picture online somewhere that's got Michael Burnham standing on the saucer for scale, and she's a lot smaller than similar pictures I've seen of people standing on the Enterprise, the original Enterprise saucer. So yeah, I think it's a pretty big ship.
Mm-hmm.
For a science ship, that seems a little strange.
Yeah, that would be kind of unusual. So it'd be interesting to see what her capabilities are going to be like, or if they have any secret surprises on board to fight the Klingons.
I'm sure they do, like the kitty.
Yeah, what was that thing?
I don't know.
Was that like the pig lizard from this Galaxy Quest?
Yeah, right.
Except a lot meaner.
Yeah, and of course, in serial sort of grim show style, they have to set up that Lorca has, had this thing beamed over and put in his little menagerie for sort of tenting his fingers, like we're gonna get back to this one later, I'm sure.
Yeah, kind of shades of Alien right there. Speaking about the Alien podcast.
Right. Yeah. Right. But that's
I was definitely thinking about that when they first beamed over. I was like, why is this literally an Alien movie?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Oh, I know. Is it that scene where Burnham was crawling through the tunnels there? Just really reminded me of Tom Skerritt in Alien. When he was when Captain Dallas was going through there trying to flush the alien out.
Right.
Or when it runs past the first time and they just see like movement.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, yeah, by the way, that part where that little throwaway moment where the Klingon went, shh, Oh, that was priceless.
Yeah.
That really was.
Oh my God, that was so good.
So strange. Yeah, just like, who are you? Shh. Oh my God. Yeah, he's dead.
No, this is definitely. I mean, there's definitely the writers there definitely showed a kind of a really nasty, dark sense of humor there. So I'm definitely hoping that they'll run with that.
Do you think, either of you, as we go forward, that the show will try to sort of bite little things, sample genres? This week was clearly like kind of an Alien ripoff. I don't mean rip-off, I just mean they borrowed. Do you think that they'll be doing that as they go through the 13 episodes of the show?
I hope so.
Yeah.
If it's like this episode.
Yeah. So you liked the episode?
Oh, yeah. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah. Something that I really enjoyed about it was getting to meet our crew and all the people that we've heard so much about. Yeah. And of course, we get to meet Captain Lorca, played by the inimitable Jason Isaacs, who has just become a personal hero for me in the last couple months.
Oh, I know. There were rumors years ago that he was going to be up for playing James Bond before they cast Daniel Craig, and I was really hoping that would happen. But
yeah. It And it's definitely it's telegraphing a little bit in the casting of him, because you don't really I mean, he would have been a great Bond, but you don't usually cast Jason Lorca or excuse me, Isaacs unless you're got a villainous character, or at least a character that's got a dark streak.
Yeah, certainly, and but he doesn't seem like your typical bad guy, though. I don't think he's some Section 31 spook type person. He may have really been a science guy. He just kind of really got thrown into this horrible situation with the war starting with the Klingons, and maybe he's just one of these by all means necessary, and just get this thing won and get it done, and we can go ahead and move on. But that's definitely it's a more interesting take than your typical kind of stuffy stuffed shirt starship captain. Duty and honor above all else. I mean, this guy definitely looks like he'd go ahead and kick out your knees underneath you in a fight.
Right? Yeah. Throw sand in your face.
Yeah, he's the opposite of Giorgio.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's something that I like. And this is the good side of it not feeling like Trek, at least for me, is that we always see captains. They always have to be upstanding and heroic and like these paragons. And if they're not, if there's somebody like Pressman or the guy Terry O'Quinn played in the one episode with the Pegasus, I can't remember the character's name. It's like those are the bad guys. But in this case, we have a captain who's like, I don't really know about this guy. Like, he might not be the guy that we're going to look to. I feel like he's sincere. He wants to win this war for sure. But for somebody like Michael Burnham, who is looking hopefully for redemption, or at least punishment after doing things that were against the sort of beliefs and rules of Starfleet, to hook her up with a guy like this, that's bad. That's like an enabler. That's like if you're trying not to, you're an alcoholic and you're hanging out around the bar. Yeah, it's not really good. I know.
It kind of makes you wonder if his character, maybe we'll find out more about this as the series goes on, if he's already done some really, really bad things that we don't know about just yet. Kind of like, it sort of brings, you're mentioning Battlestar Galactica as well, too. And it kind of brings to mind a little bit about, how they had Michelle Forbes play Commander Kane, the commander of the Pegasus, who was just, she was a hard ass, and she even, murdered her first officer on the bridge as well, too. So, God only knows what she was capable of. But, it'd be very interesting to see if he was that type of guy. So,
yeah.
But you can definitely see some of the Ron Moore Battlestar Galactica influence at work here as well, too, I think, and, certainly in the overall dark tone. So,
sure.
I'm definitely digging that.
Well, we don't know who the first officer was before Saru got on there, so maybe they had a similar situation.
That's true. Yeah, I got to send us more first officers. It's not a job that you want.
So we've met Lorca. We've also met Cadet Tilly, who I mentioned before, who wants to call Michael Burnham, was it like Mickey or something?
Yeah. Oh, Mickey, you're so fine.
We got to bring that back.
Blow my mind.
They definitely have to bring that back. I want to see that happen. And also Lieutenant Stamets, that I think I'm saying right. I've had a lot of trouble saying that name in the run up to this show, but then even on the show, I feel like I heard it 3 or 4 different ways. Like,
I just call him Lieutenant Asshole.
There you go. Perfect. Or
am I allowed to say this on that podcast?
Let's see. Well, this is PG-13, so that's fine.
Okay, all right, good enough.
If they can use cable cursing on Discovery, then we're fine, I think.
Okay, good.
Yeah, or just Lieutenant Marc from Rent, or just whatever. That works too. And he's working on some very strange things in his lab that we later find out is actually. I was hoping you guys could explain it to me. So there are spores, and they can travel at warp or something. Like, what was actually going on? What were we explained to at the end? Ella.
I don't know.
I was thinking about the creepy ship from, was it Into Darkness, where they had the scary ship that went way too fast?
Oh, you mean like the movie Event Horizon?
I have no idea.
Are you talking about a Star Trek episode? Because there's a movie called Event Horizon.
No, I'm talking about JJ Trek.
Oh, JJ Trek. There's a ship that went too fast.
Was it the
really
USS Vengeance? The big dreadnought that they built.
Oh well, they had a transwarp drive.
Black
ship. That's right. Well, that was the Vengeance. Yeah, that was the big black ship, the really nasty one.
Right. Yeah. But you don't even need ships in that universe though, because they can just beam from planet to planet. But that is a different show. So apparently we've got something similar to that here. Like we all thought, as Michael Burnham did, that this would be some kind of biological weapon, but I wondered why in the middle of the episode, Lieutenant Marc from Rent stops the entire show and then he gives this big speech about the muscles and tendons and veins or whatever of the universe, and it has to do with astromycology. And I'm like, interesting. Everybody thinks that their field has to do with everything, so maybe this is just a speech about that. And then it turns out he's right. Apparently, they're working on an organic propulsion drive, which is very strange.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess it would certainly put you at an advantage if you could jump anywhere in the universe that you wanted to go. But in terms of how they want to weaponize that against the Klingons, I don't know. But there's probably more to it than meets the eye, as we've kind of seen with all the other elements that they seem to be lining up with this as well. Yeah,
it's very imaginative, and it's certainly out of the box for Trek. But I just wonder how, if it's sort of like an escalation in storytelling, and that we've told all the stories, even Enterprise, which is supposed to be about the origins of Starfleet, essentially, turns into like this sort of time travel, time war type thing. Like we couldn't just have a show that was about a lady who's trying to get her groove back, and be a captain, be on this ship and serve well. Now we have to we introduce like this whole idea of there's this faster than anything propulsion drive that's based on fungus, I guess. So I wonder how that'll shake out. I was kind of wondering what you guys thought about that as well, because this clearly doesn't make it into future centuries that we know about. So where do you think they're going with this? Ella, what do you think?
I don't know. I'm intrigued, but I don't know where it's going.
And do the ships smell like mildew? That's what I want to know.
That's definitely a possibility there. I mean, I've it certainly smelled like my dorm room closet before I moved out at the end of the year. But I don't know. I hope it's one of those things where they've actively plotted that out, and they know the writers know exactly where they want to take it. Yeah. If not, it may just end up turning to be like all the 50 different elements in Lost that they never tied up by the end of the series.
Man.
Just kind of threw that out there and forgot completely about it. Don't worry about it. The audience won't remember that from the day to day. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I'm intrigued. I mean, honestly, I'm usually pretty decent at guessing the direction that these things are going to go into, and I definitely don't know what they're going to be doing with that. So that's definitely a plus on the writer's part. So
it doesn't register on your threat ganglia.
No, not just yet. But, we'll see. If they forget about it for the next 5 episodes, then I guess we'll have our answer.
Right. I was going to ask you about what you thought about the show and how it. A lot of people seem to either complain about the look of the show or love the look of the show, just in terms of how it fits with the other shows in terms of their style visually. Marc, how do you feel about the visual style of the show?
I love the visual style of the show. Honestly, I can understand from the point of view of the hardcore fans of Star Trek. I've been watching this for years. That it definitely doesn't fit into how can 10 years from now we can go from all of that cool stuff that we see on the Discovery to the Starship Enterprise looking like the 1960s version of the 22nd century.
Right.
So they're communicating with each other via holograms. Look very, very Star Wars-y type of look to that. Whereas beforehand they were just communicating on visual screens and things like that. So yeah, I mean in terms of overall continuity, it seems like it's more like from the Kelvin universe than the original series universe in a lot of ways. ways, and certainly the look of the bridge and, the technology that they have on display and all the touch screens and all the rest of that stuff. But, I tend to be less nitpicky about that kind of thing because I realize, this is 2017. So obviously we can't have a show that looks like it was shot back in the 1960s, although right. I do kind of miss the miniskirt uniforms were kind of nice and I do miss those. But aside from that, though, it's definitely, seems to have a pretty realistic look and feel. Everybody's wearing the same uniform. That's kind of a nice change from Next Generation where everybody was wearing a different uniform.
Right. Yeah.
So it definitely seems more military, more Navy to me, which is, kind of a thing that I like as well, too. So, overall, I definitely think it works. And I think it's just one of those things that the fans are just going to have to not think about in terms of how it fits in with series continuity.
You're probably right. There's also some elements like there's, I think we see a robot like crew member in this episode. And then, of course, there was Ensign Daft Punk from the premiere. And you also see cybernetic elements, which I thought was interesting. I think you and I, as a cyberpunk writer yourself, you and I talked when you appeared on Enterprise Individuals about how the cyberpunk elements that you write about just never made it into this universe. Computers are an afterthought almost, and there's very, except for like something like Geordi's prosthesis, you don't see a lot of cybernetics, and yet we have it here in the show. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's true. Was that with what was it? The Dennis, her character? Yeah, she got kind of
right.
Half of her face blown off in the Battle of the Binary Stars, and had to have that put on there. Yeah, and there was also Lorca's mention about how he didn't want to get any kind of a prosthetic put on because of his eyes. He'd suffered some kind of injuries to his eyes as well too. Yeah. So that is kind of interesting. So yeah, I'd like to see them develop that a little bit as well too. Obviously I like cyberpunk and those kinds of elements. So there definitely seem to be a lot more open to doing those different kinds of things, which is a nice refreshing change. Yeah.
Ella, what do you think? Are you
Sorry, repeat the question. So I was very distracted by Mark's answer.
It was entrancing. Just the not the visual style necessarily, but the idea of adding things, other future things like cybernetics and robotics and things like that into your Trek.
Right. The first two episodes, I was a little distracted, and by just like how futuristic it was with the holograms I talked about before. But this episode, I'm kind of leaning into it, to be honest. Okay. Just because it's visually pretty stunning. And I think it's trying to be more like what the original series would have been if they had like all the cool green screen CGI effects.
Yeah.
And I was hearing sound bites out of the original series when Burnham was on the bridge for the first time. I heard like a whistle or something that made me like flash back. So that was really nice, I thought. As for the cybernetics, I didn't really think about it when I was watching it. But now that both of you point that out, it is really interesting that they would choose to have that sort of like human robot hybrid look in this series as opposed to the other series. I guess it could be something about how it's a little bit darker. The tone is darker, so like more people are having to have like was it Kayla? What was her name? Kayla, when she walked into the cafeteria.
The helmsman from the Shen show, yeah.
Yeah, like the reason she has that is because she got hurt in the war. Yeah. So if we're going to see that as like a recurring theme where people have cybernetics because they were hurt in the war.
That could be neat, yeah.
Yeah.
Although the communications officer on the Shen show had like a Lobot sort of thing around his head, and I don't know if that was something that he needed because of an injury or if that's just their version of the thing that Uhura sticks in her ear to help him be communications officer. I like light seems to be a real theme so far in the show. Of course, the Klingons lit the beacon last week, and then now Lorca. They give a kind of weak explanation as to why the sets are so dark because Lorca, the light hurts his eyes. So I think it's funny that if they're trying to shake the sort of implication that they're borrowing, or this is even said in the J.J. Abrams universe, they probably shouldn't keep going to the light and the lens flares and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, they now have
it's damning.
Look cool. So.
Yeah.
But well, you notice they did the same thing too. On the Next Generation movies. From the TV series where everything was very, very light and bright. Obviously they're shooting it for television, so they had those limitations. But like when you go to like the Star Trek movies, particularly like First Contact, very, very, very dark lighting. So that's kind of in that same tradition, I think.
Right. And also war is always darkly lit because when the Enterprise is thrown into the timeline in yesterday's Enterprise, suddenly the bridge gets really dark.
Yeah, and I love that look in that episode as well, too. And I kind of missed it when the episode was over. Like, oh, man.
They're going to go back to the hotel lobby.
I know. Yeah. That would have been great if they just kind of stayed in that universe for like, half a season. That would have been fantastic. But alas, it was not to be.
Well, yes. Let's talk about, as we're getting close to the end of the show here, tell me some of your favorite parts or your favorite part from the episode. Ella, what really stood out for you in the show?
I was kind of distracted by the thought that Sarek might have talked to Lorca about Burnham.
Oh, okay.
Because he said that bit about waste, and that's like exactly. I think Sarek used the word waste when they had that like 1,000-mile like mind meld.
Yeah, right.
He was like, "I don't want to see your talents wasted," and then Lorca was like, "I don't want to see waste within the Federation," and I was intrigued. I don't know. My favorite part is the whole episode.
Valid. Totally valid.
I'm very enthralled by this episode.
I like the breath print, which does not.
Oh my god.
does not seem very secure. And plus, I think speaking of aliens, didn't they have those in Alien Resurrection? Ella, you watched those recently, right?
I don't think I watched Resurrection recently.
Oh, okay. Because Call, Winona Ryder's character, I think, like uses she gets Dan Hidea's breath somehow and like opens one of the doors with it. So it doesn't seem real secure, like a real good security system for your Navy ship.
Yeah, they might want to go for the retinal scan.
Yeah, right.
Pluck somebody's eyeball out if you want to get past that.
Right. Yeah. That's something else that I wanted to point out that isn't something that I kind of wish that they would work on is I want to see more aliens. Like Saru is great; he's so fully realized, but other than that, it's just kind of all humans.
Yeah, that was a big improvement for Saru, though. In the first episode, he seemed kind of like this nebbish alien type, almost like an alien incarnation of C-3PO, which was kind of really annoying. But this time around, though, I mean, he's first officer, and he seems, they definitely seem to be getting a better grip on the character, which is good to see.
And he likes blueberries.
Yes,
right.
I like blueberries. Everybody likes blueberries.
Well, apparently you get blueberries in a Federation prison, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, they feed them better than they feed them on Rura Penthe, I guess.
You're right. Yeah, exactly. Mark, did anything really stand out for you about this episode?
I really liked Commander Landry.
Okay, sure.
The security officer. She seems she's definitely seems like a very, very interesting character, and there's definitely no nonsense. Not asserting herself in kind of like the way that Tasha Yar did when she tried to seem so tough at the very beginning of Star Trek: The Next Generation. She's just very, very quietly badass, and
right.
I definitely like that. And very, the alien was like busting through the door, and she's sitting here, and it's like, we need to leave. Yeah, very, very calm, very, very bad. She's definitely somebody you want on your side in the firefight. You can see. There's a little flash of a very familiar relationship between her and the captain at the very end, when they're talking about how they, beam their little pig lizard guest back to the ship.
Right.
And, you would suspect that I would suspect that there's, some kind of interesting relationship between the two of them, which maybe they're the only two people who are really in the know as to what's really going on there or something else. But, I found myself intrigued by that, and I do hope they develop that as well.
Yeah, Rika Sharma, another Battlestar Galactica veteran there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. Yes. Yeah. She was one of the final five, wasn't she?
Very old spoiler, but yeah, spoiler nonetheless.
Yeah, I know. If you don't know about that by now,
you're right. I also thought it was interesting, and I think that this appears in the JJ films as well. Maybe they borrowed it from that, but now going to warp seems to have a kind of Star Wars sort of effect. Because you kind of shoot away, and then there's like a kind of a hyperspace sort of swirl outside the windows, which normally hasn't been the case. It's just the Doppler star effect.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, maybe it's less of the rubber bandy thing like we saw from Next Generation.
Right.
But My opinion, I still like the Star Trek the motion picture going to warp the best. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's the end all be all of that effect.
Yeah, that is a great effect. The filming of the episode too is interesting. It's very un-Trek. There's a lot of like that shaky cam sort of thing that you get on Law and Order, or like a detective show, where it's not just nailed down to the tripod. It sort of moves around and it's supposed to give it a more I don't know, like a more tense kind of feel. Yeah,
this is definitely. They did a lot of that on Battlestar Galactica as well too.
Yeah, exactly.
More cinema verite, like you're almost as if you're a person on board the ship and you're following it around and seeing the action for yourself. So, but it's not distractingly so. I mean, I didn't really pick up on that too much, but in some cases, it's just really, really shaky and it gets to be annoying. But in this case, I think it was definitely seemed a lot more organic than that.
Ella, are you a Battlestar Galactica fan?
Not really, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Never even tried?
I haven't seen that much of it.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, please. I remember I watched the original series when I was a kid.
Right, yeah. Well, me too.
Shows you how old I am.
Well, insofar as you should send somebody to a non-Star Trek show on a Star Trek show, I'd say check out Battlestar Galactica, the reboot. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I think if you like that and you're unsure about this, certainly if they keep going in this direction, I think that the people who like the Ron Moore Battlestar Galactica will definitely appreciate the way that this is going.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, we're pretty much wrapping up here. I think that's going to be our show for this week. So I want to say thanks to the listeners for tuning in. If you like what you hear on this show, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at EISTPod for updates. And you can get notified when new episodes of both this show, Star Trek Discoverage, and Enterprising Individuals, our main show, are released. And you can tweet to us on the show by using the hashtag Discoverage. Join us next week. Come back next Sunday, and we'll be talking about the 4th episode of Star Trek Discovery, The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry. Yikes, that's really the title of the episode.
It sounds like a Thomas Harris novel.
Yeah, exactly. No kidding. Mark, where can people find you online?
My personal website is www.hammerjack.net.
Great. And Ella, where can people find Generations Geek on the internet?
You can listen to our podcast at The Chronic Rift. Otherwise, you can check out our website, generationsgeek.com, or we're trying to gain followers on the Generations Geek Instagram, which is run exclusively by me, and that's just Generations Geek.
Generations Geek on Instagram.
Yes. Okay,
great. Well, thanks to both of you for joining me on the episode.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
And we are signing off for now. This is Caliban for Ella and Mark saying live long and prosper.